Hi students at Burr & Burton. I wish I was there in person to give you the Earth Day speech that you deserve, but instead you're going to get the virtual version, which is all right. I'm going to start by reading a few lines of poetry from Charles Wright. How is it we can't accept this, that all trees were holy once, that all light is altar light, and floods us day by day, and bids us the air sheet lightning around us, to sit still and say nothing here under the latches of paradise. I love the thought in those words in Wright's poem because I think, and I hope you feel this way too, maybe after being home and perhaps spending a little more time outside than usual, which is that we already have paradise around us, and we're so fortunate to live in Vermont, in a place that nature feels a little forward and accessible to us, and I know I'm feeling deeply appreciative of that right now. In some places, access to green space and nature is a privilege, and I think will be increasingly so. In my abbreviated chat with you, I want to give you a few tips for kind of how to maybe progress and move forward in your own environmental activism and writing and work. So I grew up in Eastern North Carolina, a place where big green organizations weren't really present. Conservation wasn't a really common topic, and I had to sort of stumble my way in. And I think I led with being wonder-driven. So my first tip is to sort of decide what you find most beautiful, most exquisite, most worth fighting for out in the world and plug in there. My second thought is imagining how can we make conversations about the environment more inclusive. So right now we live in this sort of online frenzy where it seems really fashionable to intellectually dunk on other people when you can. What happens there is we lose the ability to see each other, to communicate with grace and respect, and we end up on these polarized ends of the spectrum. If we're going to address climate change, if we're going to save our planet, if we're going to save species, we're going to do it by collaborating with people with whom we do not agree. That is an inconvenient truth of the matter. And so how do we make conversation more possible? I think it takes work on both ends, but that's something I think a lot about. Another thing that I've developed is a sort of lens for seeing the suffering of others, the suffering of other species, the suffering of other humans. So the thing about environmental pollution, environmental degradation, and climate change is that it really twists the knife on people who are already suffering. So if you are already living in poverty, if your home has already been flooded or is in a flood zone, if you're already struggling with, systemic racism or a chronic illness, when climate change, not unlike the pandemic, starts to put pressure on us and our jobs and our livelihoods and the planet, it is harder on those who have not been able to build up resilience. So thinking about how can you have a line of inquiry about that, how can you witness that, how can you help, and not in a sort of white savior sort of way, but in a very collaborative way, asking people, what do you need? How can I help? Another thing I think about when it comes to being environmentally aware is sincerity. I think it's really easy to posture online and pretend that you are somebody who cares about the environment, or somebody who's really on top of climate change, or you bought a cool bracelet from an organization that supports, Indigenous women somewhere. That's all well and good, but I think it's so important not to perform environmental awareness or perform virtuosity, but to think about sincerity. So the Latin phrase esse quam videre, which is to be rather than to seem. And those are the words I will leave you with. All right, good luck, and wishing you safe passage through this weird moment, and I hope we get to reconnect in person sometime soon. Thanks.